Hey Ram, to answer your question about grouping, I turned to the chapter review for chapter 5, okay, and this is on page 256. So I just took number 10 here, where it says factor by grouping, and you wanted examples of factoring by grouping. So I'm going to give this a try. So looking at these examples, now factoring by grouping doesn't happen as often as the other types of factoring. However, when it does, it's obviously very handy. So if I look at 10a, I want to factor this by grouping. Now a little tip, in order for it to group nicely, that means I need to have two terms and two terms, then chances are you're going to have a minimum of 4 terms. Okay. For example, in this case, if I only have 2 terms, there's nothing to group, there's just the 2 terms. If I had 3 terms, again, it would be difficult to group because there would be 2, you can group 2 of them together, and then you're going to have the 1 term by itself. So if you see 4 terms, it's a good idea to check to see if you can do it by grouping. So to factor this by grouping, I'm going to rewrite it over here. So 10a, so 4m squared plus 12m, and I'm going to change the color, of this set of the other 2 terms, plus 3m plus 9. So I just copied 10a over here. And the reason I did that is because I want to focus on 2 terms at a time. Okay. So if I focus on these 2, I'm going to group these 2. Okay, so one group, one group. So if I just factor the first group, well, what can I factor out of there? What can I common factor out of there? Just a 4, because 4 can go in 4 and 12. And since I have an m squared there and an m there, at most I can only factor out a single m. Okay. Now what am I left with? What am I left with? Well, I am left with, since I have 2 m's there, I factored out 1, then I just have a single m left. 12 divided by 4 is 3, so I have plus 3. And then since I have a single m, if I factor that out, there's no more m in here. Done. So this is common factored for the blue. If I'm not convinced this is correct, I can expand it back in just to double check. 4m times m is 4m squared. 4m times 3 is plus 12m. Okay. Now let's look at these 2 terms. What can I factor out of these 2? 3 and 9. No, 3 is the only thing I could factor. So then what's left in the bracket? Just an m plus 3, because 3 times 3 is 9. Okay. Now next step, once I have them both factored, then I should have a similar bracket in both. And in both cases I have an m plus 3. Okay, so that means I'm going to, if I look at this whole thing as just one term here, which is a blue, one term here, which is the red, what's common in both the blue and the red? Just the m plus 3, right? So I factor that out. And then what am I left with then? Well, I'm left with, if I took out the m plus 3 from both terms, I'm just left with 4m plus 3. There's the 3. And I'm done. Okay, notice how one set of bracket, another set of bracket, and that will give me all of this. Again, you can double check your answer by multiplying it back out, and you should end up with what we started with. Okay, and that was A. So let me do one more example for you. Let me scroll this down a little bit. I'll try C. Okay. So for C. Now for C, again, I'm going to look at these 2 terms together. So I'm going to copy that down in blue again, 8x squared plus 16x. And then I'm going to copy these 2 terms together, so negative 5x, negative 10. Okay, so let's see. If I look at these 2, what can I factor out of both of them? I can factor out an 8 and x squared and an x, so at most I can only factor out an x. Okay. Open up the bracket. So 8 divided by 8 is just 1, I don't need to write 1. X squared, I factor out an x, I just have an x. 16 divided by 8 is 2. I have a single x, I factored it out, it's gone, close bracket. Okay. Second part, the red, what can I factor out of both those 2 terms? It looks like maybe just a negative 5. if I factor out a negative 5, what am I left with? Negative 5 divided by negative 5 is just a 1. Did I factor out an x? I did not. Negative 10 divided by negative 5 is plus 2. Now you know you're on the right track if you get to this stage and you notice that this whole term and this whole term has something in common, and it should be whatever's in the bracket, and it sure is. So then my final answer is just x plus 2, close the bracket, and then whatever's left over, 8x minus 5. 8x minus 5. Sorry, I'm not sure why I changed the color on me, but just to reduce confusion, 8x, 8x, and then minus 5. Okay, so hopefully that answers your questions, Ram. If you want more examples or further clarification, please just post under math question like you did, math questions, and yeah, I'll answer it with a video. Alright, take care.